Hello and welcome to Opinionated Marketers with me, Charles Nixon, and Kiran Kapur from Cambridge Marketing College. We were wondering what we were going to discuss today, but Kiran has seen a very interesting article which has opened up the whole issue of segmentation and society from a marketer's perspective. Kiran, in a slightly expurgated version, would you like to explain what it is that you have read?
Yes. So what this sparked often is a Conservative minister in the UK government who quit yesterday, George Freeman. He quit because he said that he couldn't afford the rising mortgage costs based on his salary, his junior ministerial salary of £120,000. And he complained that the economy had changed and therefore his mortgage costs had gone up. There was lots of reasons why he can't possibly afford to cope with his new mortgage levels. The two things that really interested me about it, one was his current junior minister's salary is £120,000. To put that in context, the median salary in the UK is £33,000. So that's a heck of a difference. He's earning 4 times as much as the average person, and somehow he can't afford to live on that. The other thing that intrigued me was he's dropped his £120,000 junior ministerial salary and is going back to the back benches on a ministerial salary of £86,000. So somehow he thinks he's going to top up his ministerial salary, his MP salary, to above 120,000. Let's not go into the ways that might be done. But and I thought we were actually going to have a discussion about how not to brief the press and perhaps how to think about how your words could be interpreted, because of course the left-wing press are going, well, this proves that the Conservative government has trashed the economy, not even ministers can afford, and of course other people are laughing at this guy not being able to live on 120,000. However, what we then discussed was actually there's a really interesting part here about how much is enough for your segment.
Yes, the PR side of things is a very interesting one, and you have to think about the motivations of a gentleman who decides he's going to resign from the cabinet in the run-up to a general election. It sends significant messages, and he probably is fairly well in control of the messages that he wanted to send out. But the issue of how much is enough has been around for quite a while, certainly from the days of Theresa May, where the jams, the just about managings, were the phraseology. And certainly we now, with the impact of inflation, have situations within our segments of customers who are worried about how much they can afford and what is enough. But it is an element which is now rather complicated by not just the economics of it, but the societal position and the aspirations. I think that we have a situation where millennials and indeed other generations look at what they want and have, and possibly to some degree exclude children from that aspect, whereas past generations would include children and all the costs that go with that, and therefore we need to think about what it is that people aspire to, what they are motivated by, rather than necessarily just about the money. And I think it means that for marketers, segmentation now becomes much more psychoeconomic rather than just demo-economic. And I think the highlighting of a person who feels that they cannot survive on 120 may well be one that might get pilloried, but it is an interesting aspect that there are groups of people out there who feel they cannot cope on salaries which may be double or treble the national average. So within the groups that we are targeting, we need to think quite clearly as to what it is that those people are actually aspiring to and feel that they can afford. We have seen retail inflation go down recently, but that in itself doesn't necessarily bring about an increase in the sale of goods and services, and the economy is sort of seemingly flatlining. So we are in a process of having to understand our marketplace better and potentially finding some new ways of appealing to it.
Yes, you said you'd read an FT article talking about the reduction in the birth rate in a number of economies, because, as you said, in the past, you had children in order that they were there to look after you in the old age. I mean, not just that, but one of the reasons for having children was they looked after you in your old age. Now, of course, we have the opposite view that actually maybe we can't afford them, or it's cheap and there is no economic necessity to have children. I'm phrasing that very badly, but the motivations may be slightly different to the way they used to be. Is that a fair reading of the article?
Yes, it is. It's a fair reading, though the interesting aspect is it's a major interview with a Finnish scientist who is basically saying that nobody actually quite knows why there is this massive drop in fertility rates, and there are all sorts of arguments as to how it has happened, but the result of which is it is happening, and we've got population declines in many European markets. We've got population declines in the Far East, those marketplaces which are seemingly growing outside of, say, Africa and some parts of South America are doing so through immigration. But migration is causing one of the biggest political headaches. So we have some very interesting scenarios when we look at, if you like, the traditional UK economic market as to why people would want to buy or spend a certain amount of their salary on things which may not necessarily be the first port of call to anyone who thinks about them in the old way. They want to spend them on experiences, travel, holidays, rather than necessarily saving up and affording a house. They will continue to rent, and it is an interesting set of circumstances that I think we need to consider. At the moment, I'm just preparing to teach the innovation program, and the innovation aspect of any marketing department these days is crucial to the nature of what it is that's offered, in a way in which we can think about different ways of improving the working lives of most people. And that's what marketing is about, and therefore it does come back to this, what is a wage that you can afford to live on, and what do you want to spend it on? I think that's the second and important part of the sentence.
I think there's, from a marketing perspective, we definitely have to be looking at what our customers can afford or are aspiring to afford. You were talking earlier about luxury goods, and your suggestion was maybe one didn't need a handbag, let alone a handbag costing sort of £1,500 to £2,000. But actually, if you slap those brand labels on it, and brands have proved this, onto something that costs less, the assumption is that it's a fake. It's not an assumption of, oh, I've got a good bargain. So consumers will always use price as a signifier of certain things. But we also have to be aware of what our customers can do.
Oh yes, absolutely. And the IPA is running a series of campaigns at the moment. One of which is, spend 60% of your budget on building the brand and 40% on selling. It's an important aspect. Branding is absolutely critical because people have got to have faith in what it is that they're buying. The question is, what is it they're buying, and why do they want to buy it? And I think the Imelda Marcos approach to several hundred pairs of shoes isn't something that necessarily rings true these days, given the state of the economy. But doesn't mean you're not buying any shoes or any clothes. The question is, why do you buy them, and what do you want from them? Because we now have another imperative, the imperative of what are we doing to the damage of the planet by buying cheap textiles? So I suppose what it really indicates is it's not just finance. There are many more complicated motivators in our marketplaces these days, and a full and balanced approach to understanding the segments is, well, to be honest, it is the nirvana for most marketers, and therefore market research at an in-depth level becomes almost de rigueur for any fast-moving consumer goods.
Yes, which brings me back to a nice political thing, because I wanted to finish on it, where there's been quite a few, there's been several very, very large market research things about the UK the views of the UK voter on the government. And I think if you were sitting in government, or frankly, if you were sitting in opposition, where you may feel that your government, you might win the election, you might get the election as opposed to win the election. There is definitely all to play for in the hearts and minds of the UK voter, which is going to make this year really quite interesting.
Well, yes. Now, there's an interesting one. Do we put our neck out and say which way it will go?
I am happy to call it for Labour, but I think it may be a grudging win, as opposed to, I can remember the Tony Blair win of 1997, where everyone stayed up through the night because he wanted to see Michael Portillo go, and he went at 3 a.m. And there was a real sense of, yes, this is wonderful and exciting, and Tony Blair is going to be the new future. I'm not seeing any evidence that people are feeling that necessarily about Keir Starmer.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I'm not 100% sure I would say that yet it is a foregone conclusion either way, and my concern is that it's a hung parliament. But we'll have to think closer to the election, because I think there's still many things that can happen. We need to think very clearly about the economy and the rest of the world economy by the time we get to the middle of the year. Anyway, thank you very much indeed, and we hope we've provided you with some food for thought, and look forward to talking to you next time.